Welcome to Fireside Jets. My name is Alex, my co-host here, Ryan Moran. And today we're looking at the Jets' salary space. How healthy is their cap? And, going into the future, what should they be wary of? Is there, flexibility? Is there some contracts that may be bogging them down? They did make a couple signings this year. They obviously went out and got Carl Lawson last year. So they do have some big contracts on the roster, but how will they impact them in the future? How much money do they have right now and next season? These are always important things to kind of talk about because it is very easy for teams to get into salary space issues. As a Giants fan, all we've been doing is supplementing bad drafting with really high price free agents. Now, I think the Jets have done a really good job at kind of scooting around that. They've been doing really good drafting. The last two drafts, they've had A pluses for most analysts. And then you have a couple of splashy signings to go with it. And you're pairing these good draftings with good players from the free agency market. So I think so far they've done a good job, especially with the scheme fits. The injuries to Carl Lawson last year definitely did not help. They did sign Franklin Myers to a contract extension. So you got a couple new guys and a couple familiar faces that have really proven that they're capable of putting together successful seasons pretty consistently, Ryan. So before we dive into the Jets salary space and, what's going on over there, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing great, Alex. Always a fascinating topic to discuss, in terms of the salary cap space. You obviously alluded to the fact that the last two off seasons under Joe Douglas, the Jets have splurged a little bit more. 2020, his first off season, you were still kind of going through some of the Mike McCagnon, contracts with Le'Veon Bell, Tremaine Johnson. So there were some big cap hits that really went to waste, for some time that he had to work through. And, the last two off seasons, he's done a good job, really creating that flexibility to go out and spend, on a Carl Lawson and a Corey Davis last year. And this year, those contracts before getting into this year's class, he did a good job of keeping the signing bonus money low, giving really just big roster bonus money up front for those guys to supplement for the signing bonuses. And, it alleviates, future cap problems down the road, in terms of dead money going to waste, which Joe Douglas has really done a great job of turning that around. The Jets for years had so much money on the books going to waste. And, he's really kept that flexibility for the future to where these guys got to play well to keep their contracts. And this year he took a different approach. When you look at the Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzama, Jordan Whitehead, DJ Reed, Laken Tomlinson, Jacob Martin, there were more heavy signing bonuses given out, and he kept all those base salaries really low. So, the Jets didn't have as much space as I think people anticipated going into this year with free agency based on all the draft money that they were going to have allocated with all the premium picks they had. So the cap hits this year for a lot of those guys are low, and then they really kick in next year. So, we'll get into how they can kind of keep that flexibility moving forward. Right now they're at 9.97 right now. So they do have the money if they want to get a nose tackle, linebacker, free safety, whatever. They're at 12.4 for next year. And obviously this will change a little bit when you factor in some of the guys counting against the budget right now won't be on the roster this year, based on the top 51. And, they just still do have to sign 3 draft picks as well. So it will change a little bit the next 2 years, but they do have, the flexibility in 2024. I mean, they're like 115.5. So there is flexibility moving forward. And, we'll get into some of the ways JD can kind of keep things fluid in terms of adding, outside the building players.
Absolutely. I mean, looking right off the bat, right now the team has 9.97 million in available salary space. So a good amount of money to go into the season. You always want to have some cushion. Injuries always arise, during training camp. And, if you have to supplement some positions, it's nice to have that extra cash flow to go out and sign players. And, there's been times where the Giants have been extremely strapped when the season comes around, and they haven't had the flexibility to inject more talent into the roster if need be. But having 10 million right now, definitely a good sign. As you mentioned, they still have some guys that still need to sign their rookie deals, but that won't be too significant, I imagine. So those 3 first-round picks, obviously, it definitely takes up a nice bit of change. But like you said before, Douglas has done a tremendous job signing healthy contracts to this roster. The contracts that he signed for Corey Davis, even CJ Mosley is this next year is going to be really easy to get rid of. Corey Davis, Carl Lawson. Right now, so these guys have been on the roster for a year. This year, if you were to cut them, you're talking about eating additional money. There's no cap savings from cutting Mosley, Lawson, or Davis this season. But again, you don't need to because these guys are essential pieces to the roster. They are very much a part of the rebuilding program. But then you go and look at 2023, and they can clear up a ton of money this way. So they have $12.4 million available in cap space for 2023, but there are ways that they can open up a lot more. So you're looking at CJ Mosley, they can release him, eat 3 million in dead money, and add 15.5 million to the cap space. So if they find a couple of these guys like, Jermaine Sherwood, Nasruddin, there's a couple of guys here. If they take steps forward, you're not replacing CJ Mosley, but maybe you take that money and you flip it into another linebacker. Linebackers traditionally aren't the most expensive position to address in free agency. You can get guys for 10 million a year that are pretty serviceable. The Giants went and got Blake Martinez on $10 million contract over 3 years, something like that. And so far, he's been one of the league's best tacklers. So you can get guys that aren't going to destroy your cap space. Now, CJ Mosley is a little bit different because he's also a great coverage linebacker. He adds a lot of value. So maybe they keep him for that. Maybe they see the value in him if he has a really good season. If not, he's falling off a little bit season. We'll see how it goes. They can always release him and save the 15.5 mil. Carl Lawson, another contract. It's basically a 2-year deal because after that second year, you can get rid of him and save a ton of money, right? I really like how Joe Douglas structured these contracts because it doesn't bog them down past the second season. Carl Lawson, if they were to cut him next year, they'd only count $333K in dead money and they'd save 15 million. So you're talking about tremendous amounts of savings. If Carl Lawson, doesn't come off that injury properly, there are ways that they can work around that and maybe reallocate that 15 mil towards another pass rusher. Corey Davis, same situation, 666K in dead money and then 10.5 million in cap savings if they want to cut him in 2023. So right now they have a $12.4 million team cap space, but if they can add 30, 40, really $40 million in additional salary space if they cut Mosley, Lawson, and Davis. Now you are getting rid of 3 of your prime players there. So you definitely have to find ways to replace them. But, maybe Jermaine Johnson takes a big step forward in his second year and he can replace Lawson to a degree. You have Corey Davis, maybe Garrett Wilson's that replacement. I imagine he will be. I do not think Corey Davis will be on the team next year personally. I don't think he's worth 15 mil. Or rather, yeah, so it's 10 mil, 10.5 mil they'd be paying him. I don't think he's going to be worth it. I think Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore will be your primary guys. You can go out and draft another guy in the second round to replace Corey Davis's possession receiver kind of a style. And then CJ Mosley, we'll see what kind of season he has this year. Maybe they cut him, maybe they don't, Ryan. But what are you thinking about those 2 players specifically? Which ones do you think might be gone and which ones do you think might stay just based on the salary cap hits that they have?
For sure. It's a great question. I think, it's put all those guys, Corey Davis, Carl Lawson, CJ Mosley, John Franklin Myers, even some of the guys who signed this year, like they have to deliver this year. And I think that's really what you want to see first and foremost is that these guys have incentive to go out and play their best this year. Obviously, you said it, there's a ton of flexibility with all those guys, to move off of those contracts and free up space if they want to go out elsewhere and, look for upgrades. But at the same time, let's say those guys do have good years. They know that there is an easy out in their contract for the organization and that they probably won't get that on the open market. I think another way that the Jets could really alleviate space in 23 is by giving some of those guys extensions and really spreading out those cap hits, giving a signing bonus with, a lot, and then kind of keeping the base salary low in 2023. So there is, a multitude of ways they can go about it. It's just going to come down to how these guys perform this year. I don't think anything is necessarily set in stone. It's a big year ahead, and you have a couple of guys as well who are due for contract extensions. If you want to keep those cap hits early on, pretty low. When you look at Quinnen Williams and George Fant, obviously is the main 2 guys, who I think everyone would love to see stay with the Jets for a long time. So, and even Connor McGovern, a guy who's heading into a contract year, is in a good situation. I think, second year in the scheme, he's healthy, has, Laken Tomlinson now next to him. So there's definitely some big decisions ahead. That's what happens when you sign 6 guys to multi-year contracts in free agency like Joe Douglas did this year. So, we'll see how things play out. And there's definitely flexibility to either release these guys if they don't play up to their capability or, try and work extensions out to where, these guys know they may not get as much on the market, and it kind of gives them, it ensures some more guarantees and, also gives the organization, space up front to work with.
Yeah, I mean, looking at CJ Mosley specifically, his last season, coming off the injury, missed 2020, was not great, right? He really didn't play much in 2019 either, only 114 total snaps. And then last year finally makes a return after almost 2 years off, and did not have the best season. He was not very well graded in run defense. His coverage grades were not great. He did have 130 total tackles. He didn't miss 9.2% of his tackles, which is the highest since 2016. He gave up 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. and had 4 penalties. So when you're looking at CJ Mosley, do you think he bounces back after last season? I know he still had a good year, but he can be a lot better. What do you think about his 2022 season?
I expect a big year from CJ. I'll be honest. I think, he's one of those guys with a lot of incentive, to keep that contract. And he was the team MVP last year. That's what, his teammates voted him as. I guess there were a couple of other players who probably could have been in play, most notably George Fant. But, CJ is a great player. He's a leader. He's very respected. I think he brings credibility to the Jets organization, which is needed. You look at his past teams and winning experiences with Alabama, the Ravens. I think there's a lot that CJ brings intangibly. He's smart. I mean, he's a guy who will get the defense all set up pre-snap and having guys comfortable. So I think, they really didn't do very much, like we've obviously touched up on in past episodes, between free agency and the draft at linebacker. They really didn't add anyone. So I think CJ, there's big expectations for him, as a leader of the defense. And quite honestly, I think he was good last year, and I'm expecting about the same this year. I still think CJ is going to have a good year, be a consistent, reliable contributor. And right now at the linebacker position, there's a lot of guys with upside. When you look at Quincy Williams, Jamie Sherwood, Hampson Nasruldeen, possibly DQ Thomas, we'll see. But CJ is the one guy you can look at and say, all right, I have an idea on what we're going to get, from somebody at this position.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going to be able to replace CJ Mosley with Nasruldeen or Sherman or Jermaine or Sherman rather. So it's going to be tough, right? You can't really replace it. But I said there are free agent options every year that are good. Maybe the Jets go and look for a linebacker in the first round next year or the second round. So there are ways to supplement the linebacker position, but replacing CJ Mosley is easier said than done. I think he has a pretty good bounce back season. As I mentioned before, he had a ton of tackles. So he's a guy that's going to clean up in the running game. You add some more defensive pieces to this defense, like Carl Lawson and whatnot. They're going to help him. The secondary going to help him. He's going to be a little bit better in coverage. Probably had to shake off the rust. Definitely had some down games. A lot of them coming in like probably the earlier portions of the season, and they did. Most of his poor grades happened in the first 4 to 5 weeks of the year. The rest of the campaign, he had some pretty good stats. So I'm not really too worried about it. With CJ Mosley, he's probably one of the least players I'm worried about. But again, if you want to save that 15.5 mil, you could look down the road to do that. But Douglas has done a tremendous job, structuring these contracts so that they don't really bog the team down in the future. John Franklin Myers, they can save 13.5 mil by cutting him in 2024. Definitely a guy who, like, these contracts are just good. You look at them; they're basically 2-year deals with out after the second year, which really opens up a lot of flexibility. And like you said, they could always look to extend guys. CJ Mosley, he's not even 30 years old yet. You could easily look to extend some of these guys. So I do think it makes a lot of sense, but they also have a lot of youth on this team they're looking to develop and really see where they go with it. But, when it comes to Corey Davis, do you think that they get rid of Corey Davis in terms of maybe Garrett Wilson replacing him, and maybe they go out and get a possession receiver in the second round? What is your expectations for Corey Davis?
It's a great question. I'm honestly expecting a big 2022 from Corey Davis. I think he's still only 27 years old. There was so much promise and excitement when the Jets signed him last year. I think, he and Zach definitely proved early on from the jump that they have a good chemistry. You look in the preseason and a couple of games early in the regular season, Corey was really, a pretty dominant player, the Panther game, the Titan game. So, I think the situation around him is much better. I feel like there was a lot of pressure, big expectations put on his plate last year. Elijah Moore, the beginning of the season, he didn't really practice. He was hurt, didn't play in the preseason. So Jameson Crowder missed a couple of games. There was a lot on Corey's plate to start the season. And, now with a healthy Elijah Moore, with a rookie year under his belt, having Garrett Wilson now in the mix, the 3 tight ends, new running back, I feel like Corey's, primed to really succeed, just be a consistent intermediate level threat for Zach, provide size to the group. And I think there's a lot of motivation from, his standpoint to really prove that he was worth that big contract. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if he really turned in a great year for the Jets.
Well, we can hope so. We can hope so. That trio of receivers are definitely lethal. They have some tremendous talent. If Zach Wilson elevates his game, we're going to see the best version of the Jets offense. And I think we probably will end up seeing probably one of the best Jets offense we've seen in the last decades, since the AFC championships and whatnot. And it's all going to rely on Zach and that offensive line protecting him, because he seemed to be a little rattled when that offensive line gave up some sacks, gave up some pressure. He was not used to that type of pressure coming from BYU. The guy had all day back there. He was just playing and toying with some of these college level players. But when you get to the NFL, it's a little different. You're taking some big hits. They hit you, and you're like, okay, that guy is strong as hell. That is not something I'm used to. So I think Zach had to get some weight on, as he did this offseason, 10 pounds of muscle mass. And now we're seeing a player who seems to be a little bit more confident. The offensive line has improved. You got Laken Tomlinson in there, Mekhi Becton coming back, Font having a good season, and Elijah Vera Tucker going into his sophomore year. I think that overall the Jets offense is in a good place to take a pretty substantial step forward, which should make it a lot easier because a lot of those guys are on rookie contracts. Becton, Vera Tucker, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Zach Wilson, all these guys, rookie Jeremy Ruckert, so many rookie deals at big position groups, and I think that's going to really help the team financially down the road as well. A lot of their money's invested in the defense so far, and I think that that's probably the best way to go about it because those offensive positions are the most expensive aside from pass rusher, and you just got Jermaine Johnson. You got Carl Lawson still under contract. John Franklin Myers, you just signed. Quinnen Williams coming off his rookie deal. So there's a lot of different moving pieces, but I think the Jets are in a pretty good, healthy salary cap situation at the moment. But that kind of wraps up this video talking about the salary space, where the Jets are at, what their future looks like. So far, very positive. Joe Douglas has done a tremendous job building this roster through the free agency, but also knocking drafts out of the park. So if you're a Jets fan, you should be very, very happy about what the situation is right now. As a Giants fan, I'm still a little curious about what they're going to do. Some things we got to do. We're kind of purging the roster right now for some players that don't fit our scheme anymore. So it's a little bit different. But I think, we're like maybe a year or two behind you guys in the rebuild. Hopefully ours follows a similar path. I think the Jets are doing a tremendous job, and I'm so excited to continue watching this team. All my Jets friends are super happy that I'm talking about the Jets constantly, and I'm like really excited about this. I'm definitely going to be watching them all season, and it's going to be really fun. There's a lot to like about this team, and Ryan and I will be continuously providing content to make sure you guys are up to date and have everything you need to enjoy this squad moving forward. So if you enjoy the channel, make sure to like and subscribe below. As always, leave a comment, say hi below on YouTube, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Jets episode.